in this video will eliminate fat golf shots from your game for good. And the good news is there's only 2 reasons that you would hit a fat golf shot, and we're going to address both of those in this video with some really simple drills. The first way, which is probably the less common one, we're going to address the more problematic reason a bit later in the video. The first one is just a lowering of the circle. What do I mean by that? Basically, when I play golf, I swing the golf club around my body and it basically makes a big circle. So imagine when I set up the golf ball, my circle rests on the ground. So the bottom of my circle, which is kind of where the club is, would brush the ground around about where the ball is. Now that might give me a pretty decent strike. So we'll do a little illustration on the screen here to highlight this. But if I was to basically take my circle and through my body just lower it down and down and down and down and down, the lowest part of the circle is still in the same place relative to the target. But because I've lowered my circle, the contact point with the ground suddenly moves further back and back and back and back and back. So if you're someone who lowers your circle through your downswing, you're going to hit the ground early. Now, why might you do that? Well, there's a little demonstration we can do here. I'd love you to go ahead and do this. Grab 2 golf clubs. Now, we know that the clubs weigh something. By grabbing 2, we're just doubling the weight. And just hold them as kind of best you can. Just stand in a kind of rough golf posture and just start to naturally swing the golf clubs around you. And what you're going to feel is very obviously heavier golf clubs. And you're going to start to sense and realize that those heavier golf clubs have more effect on you. There's more forces on your body. The more weight we add, the more those forces get exaggerated. So when I swing 2 golf clubs, if I was to completely just relax, as those golf clubs come down towards this impact area, what are they doing to my body? Where are they trying to pull me? Well, they're basically trying to pull me down towards the golf ball and down towards this area here. That's where the weight is. So if I was to really relax, not really think too much what I was doing, swing these clubs with a fair bit of speed, it would pull me over in this direction because the golf clubs have got some weight to it. So when we are swinging the golf club, and the more speed you have, the more this happens, the golf club weighs a huge amount through impact. And it pulls you down and towards the golf ball. So it would not be uncommon for that effect to cause you to hit the ground heavy, lose a little bit of balance, and I'm sure you've been there. I'm sure you've hit a shot where it's been heavy, you felt really off balance. Well, basically that's you not offsetting the weight of the golf club. And all the shots that we hit, we have to do this. So when we look at the great players, what is actually happening? Well, there's opposing forces. The golf club is trying to pull the golfer down in this direction. The golfer is pushing back in the opposite direction. If you can offset those, you can balance that out. That's what great golfers do. So here's the little exercise I'd love you to do. Take your setup just inside the golf ball, and you're going to put yourself into around about halfway delivery position. A little bit of flex in the knees, and I want you to think about the belt line or the top of your trousers. And I want you to go through with a fair bit of speed. And as you go through, you're going to take the flex out of your legs and you're going to feel like the level of your belt rises a fraction. As you're doing that, there's going to be some rotation as well. So I appreciate you can't probably see my belt, but as I go through, what I don't want to do is do that, where there's no movement in here and the weight of the club is pulling me down towards the ground. The correct movement would be one where we make this movement. And you'll notice that yes, I've got some rotation, but look at the flex that's in my knees. It's completely gone because I've pushed. As I've rotated, my belt level here is higher than it was at the start of that exercise. And through a golf swing, it's that movement, the straightening of the legs, the pushing away from the ground and the rotation, which offsets the forces that are being applied onto you from the golf club. Now, very often we don't think of that. You know, we just swing a club around our body and it feels relatively light when we pick it up. But the reality is, when you're playing golf, there are forces there that you need to fight against. So how can I practice that? Well, really simply, I can just go ahead and do that as a little exercise. I'm not going to reach the green down there, but I'm going to put myself into this position. I'm going to go through, and I'm going to push, and I'm going to turn. And even though that ball's gone nowhere near the green, it's probably gone about 80 yards, look at the end position. There is no flex in my knees. My belt level is raised, and the strike was absolutely perfect. You'll notice I've got an alignment stick stuck in the ground. It's at a very, very shallow angle. We'll talk about where that is in a moment. So I take my setup. This time my circle rests perfectly on the ground. The more common reason that a golfer would hit the ball heavy would be at impact, that circle has been moved too far back away from the target. So the club is still hitting the ground as it should do, but it's hitting the ground too soon. This is so common. So if you're hitting fat shots, this is probably the reason why. Now, there's 3 possible ways that you could be affecting that, and we're going to cover all 3 now. The first one would be when you set up and you're setting your circle too far behind the golf ball. Your circle's relationship is very much connected to your upper body, not the golf ball. We have to take that circle, which is connected to your upper body, and put it in a good relationship relative to the golf ball. So if I was to take my setup here, and I appreciate this is very exaggerated, but if I was to take my setup like this, you can see very clearly how this setup would create a circle which lands way too far behind the golf ball. Now that's extreme, but what isn't extreme is ball a little bit too far forward, golfer leaning a little bit away from the target, maybe the hips are a little bit back, and these are all relatively small movements, but when we put them together, we're setting up, and as a coach, I look at this and I think, you're setting your circle too far behind the golf ball. Now you can still strike it well from there, but you've got to give yourself, well, you've given yourself so much more to do. So it will depend a little bit on the golf club you've got. I've got a pitching wedge in my hand here, so I want that ball pretty much middle of my stance. I would like my weight very, very fractional on that lead side. And the reason I've got that alignment stick there is because it gives me a great visual. I can see that that golf ball, from my viewpoint, is directly underneath this alignment stick. And that's why I've set this up. If I just drift a little bit too much to my right-hand side, I can now see the golf ball behind the alignment stick. That gives me some feedback. Which brings us on to the second way that you could be moving your circle backwards, which is backswing, drift, sway, lateral movement, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure you know what that looks like. It's when the golfer can move either early in the takeaway and drift this way, or probably, which is more common, is they tend to move late into the backswing. If at the top of the backswing you've drifted too much away from the target, similar to what we were saying in that first point, you've taken that circle and you've moved it behind the golf ball. Great golfers don't do that. They stay very, very centered. Now what they're doing, which is incredibly hard to see on camera, is they are shifting pressure into this trail leg. What they're not doing is they're not taking their mass, their weight, and drifting it over in this direction. So this is one of my favorite drills. You might have seen this before, but I would encourage everybody to do this because it's brilliant. It's just a great drill that opens your eyes to what good golfers do and maybe what you don't do. You take a setup. I've still got my alignment stick for a reference. Hover the golf club above the ball, and I'm just going to move it forward and back using my chest rotation to do that. Nothing with my hands, nothing with my arms. And as I do that, I don't feel any movement in my feet at all. But if I keep that movement happening and start to increase the speed and the force at which I do that, suddenly, as I increase that force, I feel things happening through my feet. Now, if we could measure that, we would see the pressure moving between both feet. And it's doing that because it's got to help me move the golf club. Really important. So as I'm doing that, look at my head. Is it moving? No, it's staying nice and centered. So once I've got this movement happening and I can feel that pressure moving between the feet, I'm just going to take this up to a backswing. And what I get, which is brilliant, as I get a centered turn with pressure shift. And trust me, if you can develop a centered turn with pressure shift, you are just massively increasing the chances of you hitting solid golf shots. If you're moving weight, that's no good. If you're drifting, that's no good. This exercise is absolutely brilliant. We'll hit shots in a moment this way, but I would encourage everybody who struggles with strike to try this drill. Start slow, build up. I can feel it. I can feel that pressure going between the feet. Take that pressure up to the top. That's my perfect backswing. So I've got my circle set at address. I've kept it there through the backswing. In the downswing, what great golfers do to make sure they never hit fat shots is they take that circle and they shift it forwards. As they shift it forwards, we're moving more towards the possibility of a slight thin shot. But you know what? When you're playing golf, slightly thin is way better than slightly heavy. So what they do is they will tend to keep their upper body fairly centered, but they make a significant lateral shift across to this lead side. Now, we're going to take this alignment stick. I'm going to take out the ground. and we're going to drop it just behind the golf ball. And you can see that that's probably, well, maybe just more than my club head width behind the golf ball, and I've got it sort of just inside the ball. Now from setup, if I was to move the club back and forth, you can see that I would make contact with it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a movement where in my downswing I shift, I add some rotation, which causes the club to land in such a way that I would not be hitting the alignment stick. And hopefully from that face on camera you can see that my head is not moving, but you can see that the contact point is always starting where the ball is. It's never back behind the golf ball. And if we can learn one thing from the great golfers, is they will never land the club behind the golf ball. They always land the club where the ball is or target side of that. I can put all three of these together. I can take a setup, making sure that my boxes are all ticked. I can start my little movement here. I can build that into a backswing, and I can land the club. And what I'm really doing here is giving myself way more chance of hitting good solid golf shots. I'm almost eliminating the fact that I'm going to hit a fat shot, because there's nothing in my technique now which would cause that circle to be back or down. And if I don't have anything in my swing which moves the circle down or back, I will always hit the ball solid. If not, it's going to be slightly thin, but it's not going to be fat.